Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every relationship when the laughter fades, the trust cracks, and the silence between two hearts becomes louder than words. But what if I told you that broken trust doesn't mean it's over? That sometimes the deepest pain can become the very foundation of the strongest love? Because the truth is, connection isn't lost when things fall apart. It's lost when we stop fighting to rebuild it. And today, I'm going to show you how to turn heartbreak into healing, distance into closeness, and pain into power. And ladies and gentlemen, every relationship, whether it's with your partner, your family, your friends, or even with yourself, is built on one unshakable foundation: trust. Trust is not given, it's earned, and once it's broken, it feels like the entire structure begins to collapse. The distance grows, words lose their power, you start questioning everything, every intention, every promise, every look. But let me tell you something powerful: trust can be rebuilt, connection can be restored, and the bond that comes from rebuilding it is often stronger than it ever was before. And the truth is, every relationship goes through seasons. There are moments of warmth and unity, and there are moments of winter, cold, distant, uncertain. The key is not to run when the winter comes, but to learn how to bring back the warmth. When trust is broken, it's easy to point fingers. It's easy to say, they did this, or they hurt me. But if you want real transformation, if you want to rebuild something sacred, you must first be willing to look inward. Healing begins not when you blame, but when you decide to take responsibility for your emotions, your reactions, your communication, and your willingness to rebuild. And every relationship is a reflection of two people's emotional states. If you're carrying fear, resentment, or pain, you'll project it. If you're holding love, compassion, and presence, you'll radiate it. So, the first step in rebuilding trust is to reconnect with the part of you that's capable of love without conditions. That's the part that understands that forgiveness isn't approval of what happened. It's the decision to free yourself from the pain of the past. Because if you stay chained to the betrayal, you'll never be free enough to love again. And love cannot grow in a heart that's still guarding old wounds. And you have to decide right now that your relationship, your connection, your peace of mind is worth fighting for. Because rebuilding trust is not a passive act, it's a choice you make every day. It's choosing vulnerability when you want to shut down. It's choosing communication when you want to withdraw. It's choosing to listen even when you've already made up your mind. It's the daily, sometimes painful decision to show up with honesty and empathy, and that takes courage, real courage. The courage to be seen, the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to try again. And there's something extraordinary that happens when two people decide to rebuild trust. It's like watching a broken bridge being repaired piece by piece. At first it feels impossible. The gap seems too wide. But then, one person reaches out. One person chooses compassion instead of criticism. One person decides to communicate openly instead of shutting down. And slowly, that bridge begins to take shape again. You see, trust isn't about perfection. It's about consistency. It's about showing up in the small moments over and over, until the other person begins to believe in your sincerity again. It's not about the words you say, it's about the energy you bring, the presence you offer, and the follow-through you deliver. And rebuilding trust means creating safety again, emotional safety. The kind of safety that says, you can open up to me without fear of being judged. You can express your truth and I'll hold space for it. That kind of safety is the soil in which love can grow again. But it can't happen if one or both people are holding on to the need to be right. Being right might win the argument, but it will lose the relationship. You don't need to be right. You need to be real. You need to be human. You need to care more about understanding than defending. And we all have moments when we fall short. when we say things we don't mean, when we let fear drive our behavior, when we push away the very person we love the most. But the beauty of being human is that we can choose again. We can apologize with depth, not just with words. We can show remorse through action. We can rebuild credibility one honest moment at a time. When trust is broken, the one who broke it must understand that words alone won't heal it. It's going to take consistency, patience, transparency, and the willingness to feel uncomfortable without giving up. And if you're on the other side, if you're the one who was hurt, your healing requires just as much courage. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means deciding that the past no longer has the power to poison your present. It means releasing the story that keeps you stuck in pain. It's saying, I will no longer let what happened control who I am or what I'm capable of feeling. When you choose to forgive, you're not saying what they did was okay. You're saying you're ready to move forward with or without them from a place of power, not pain. And rebuilding trust also requires clarity. You have to get honest about what broke the trust in the first place. Was it dishonesty, neglect, miscommunication? Was it unspoken expectations that turned into resentment? Because you can't rebuild something if you don't understand what caused it to fall apart. Clarity creates direction. Direction creates action, and action rebuilds connection. And most people think relationships die because of big betrayals. But the truth is, most relationships die from small emotional withdrawals that go unnoticed. The missed I love you, the ignored message, the lack of appreciation, the assumption that the other person should just know. Connection fades not because of the storm, but because of the silence that follows it. Rebuilding connection means bringing back intention. It means giving energy to the relationship the same way you did when it was new. When you gave without keeping score, when you listened not to reply but to understand, that's where the magic starts again. And sometimes the connection that needs rebuilding most isn't with another person, it's with yourself. Because you can't give what you don't have. If you've lost trust in your own decisions, if you've broken promises to yourself, that lack of self, rust will bleed into every relationship you touch. Rebuilding self-trust starts by keeping small promises to yourself, by following through on the commitments you make, by treating yourself with the same compassion you'd offer someone else. When you trust yourself again, you show up differently, you speak differently, love differently, forgive differently. You stop clinging and you start connecting, and every relationship is an opportunity for growth. The pain you feel is not there to punish you, it's there to teach you, to show you where you've built walls instead of boundaries, to reveal where you've been reacting instead of responding, to remind you that love without growth is fragile, but love with growth is unbreakable. So, if you want to rebuild trust and connection, you must commit to growth. Not just as a couple, but as individuals. Two strong, whole people who choose each other not out of need, but out of love. And trust is rebuilt when words align with actions, when effort replaces excuses, when empathy replaces ego. It's not easy, but that's what makes it meaningful, because everything worthwhile requires investment. Every powerful connection is born out of two people who refuse to give up when things get hard. You rebuild trust not by going back to how things were, but by creating something entirely new, something deeper, more aware, more intentional. And in that process, something incredible happens. The relationship stops being a battlefield and becomes a sanctuary, a place where both hearts can be seen, heard, and valued. A space where imperfection is not punished but embraced. A connection where love becomes not a fleeting feeling but a conscious decision, renewed every day through trust, understanding, and commitment. And when you decide to rebuild trust, you're stepping into a space of incredible vulnerability, and that's where real strength is born. Vulnerability is not weakness, It's the highest form of courage. It's standing in front of someone who knows your flaws, your fears, and your past mistakes and saying, I'm here. I'm willing to rebuild. That kind of transparency takes more power than any wall ever could. Because walls might protect you from pain, but they also block you from love. And love, real love, only grows in openness, and to rebuild trust, you must create an environment of truth. Not the kind of truth that's selective, not the kind that's filtered through fear of reaction, but the kind that's raw, real, and sometimes uncomfortable. Because truth brings clarity, and clarity builds confidence. Every lie, no matter how small, chips away at connection. But every truth, even when it hurts, lays another brick in the foundation of trust. You can't build something solid on half-truths or hidden emotions. You have to be willing to lay it all on the table. The mistakes, the regrets, the fears, and the hopes. That honesty becomes the bridge between two hearts that are trying to find their way back to each other. And when you communicate, don't speak to defend, speak to connect. Don't listen to reply, listen to understand. The goal isn't to win the argument, it's to win back the connection, and that starts when you drop the need to be right. The moment you care more about understanding than being understood, everything begins to shift. You start hearing the pain beneath the words, the fear behind the silence. You start realizing that what looked like anger was really a cry for reassurance, that what felt like distance was actually a defense mechanism. Compassion grows where judgment ends, and rebuilding trust also means showing up even when it's inconvenient. When you make a promise, keep it. When you say you'll call, call. When you say you'll change, prove it through consistent action. Because trust is not rebuilt through grand gestures, it's rebuilt through reliability. It's not about the one big apology, it's about the 100 small follow-throughs that come after it. Consistency creates certainty, and certainty builds emotional safety. Over time, that safety becomes the heartbeat of connection. And there will be moments where frustration takes over, where the old patterns start pulling you back, where part of you wants to quit. That's when you must remind yourself why you started. The goal is not to have a perfect relationship. The goal is to have a real one. Real relationships get messy, they get complicated, they challenge your patience and expose your insecurities. But they also reveal your capacity for love, forgiveness, and growth. The beauty of rebuilding trust is that it forces both people to rise above their egos and rediscover the truth of their humanity. And sometimes, rebuilding trust requires letting go of the version of the relationship that once was. You can't go back to the old, you must create something new. Something built on deeper honesty, mutual respect, and shared vulnerability. The old structure may have fallen because it was built on comfort or assumptions. The new one must be built on consciousness and choice. Every conversation, every moment of patience, every act of empathy adds another layer to that new foundation. And if you've ever broken someone's trust, understand that their healing won't be linear. There will be good days where you feel the progress, and there will be days where their fear resurfaces. Be patient with that process. Don't rush their forgiveness or demand their trust back. You can't control how fast they heal, but you can control how you show up during their healing. Keep showing up with transparency. Keep proving through your actions that you're committed. Keep being steady even when it feels like they're pulling away. That consistency will speak louder than any words ever could. And if you're the one who's been hurt, remind yourself that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means transforming the meaning of what happened. Pain is not meant to define you, it's meant to refine you. You can use that pain as a reason to build walls, or you can use it as a reason to build wisdom. You can let it make you bitter, or you can let it make you better. The choice will determine not just the future of the relationship, but the quality of your own inner peace. And one of the most powerful ways to rebuild connection is through presence. When you're with someone, be with them. Not distracted, not half engaged, but fully there. When you give someone your full attention, you're telling them, you matter, I see you, I hear you. That's how emotional safety is restored. In a world full of noise, genuine presence is rare. And it's one of the greatest gifts you can offer. Because connection thrives in the moments where two people feel fully seen. And there's also an element of humility that comes with rebuilding trust. It means admitting you don't have all the answers. It means acknowledging the impact of your actions without minimizing it. It means being open to feedback without letting defensiveness take over. Humility creates room for healing. It says, I value this relationship more than my pride. And that level of openness invites the same energy in return. When one person leads with humility, the other feels safer to drop their guard. That's when real connection begins to grow again. And rebuilding trust requires both partners to shift from a mindset of accusation to a mindset of collaboration. Instead of asking who's at fault, ask how can we fix this together? That simple shift changes everything. It turns conflict into cooperation. It turns blame into problem solving. It turns pain into partnership. Because no matter what broke the trust, healing is a joint effort. Both people must be willing to meet in the middle, to communicate openly, and to commit to growth. Not just emotionally, but spiritually and mentally as well. And connection is not something you find, it's something you create moment by moment. It's built in the late night conversations, in the small gestures of care, in the laughter after the tears. It's built when both people decide again and again that the relationship is worth the effort. And the deeper the cracks, the more powerful the rebuild can be. Because every scar becomes a symbol of strength, not weakness. It says we've been through the fire, but we're still here. And the journey of rebuilding trust also teaches you something profound about control. You can't control how the other person feels, but you can control the energy you bring into every interaction. You can control your honesty, your empathy, your consistency. You can control how you respond when old fears resurface. Every time you choose patience over frustration, compassion over criticism, truth over comfort, you're reinforcing the foundation of trust again. And love without trust is like a tree without root. It might look alive for a while, but it can't withstand the storms. Trust gives love depth. It gives it resilience. It allows both people to lean in without fear of falling. And that kind of love isn't fragile, it's unshakable, but it requires constant tending. Just like a garden, it needs attention, care, and maintenance. You can't neglect it and expect it to flourish. You have to feed it with appreciation, water it with communication, and protect it with honesty. And rebuilding connection also means learning to see the person in front of you not as the version that hurt you, but as the human who's trying to grow. Growth requires grace. It requires patience with the process and compassion for the journey. People change, but not when they're condemned, only when they're understood. The moment you choose to see someone not through the lens of their past mistakes, but through the lens of their effort, you create space for transformation. And sometimes the process of rebuilding teaches you that connection doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes rebuilding trust is about finding peace, closure, and forgiveness within yourself. It's about releasing the grip that pain has on your heart, so you can love again, whether with that person or someone new. Because the ultimate goal of rebuilding trust isn't just to fix a relationship. It's to restore your capacity to love, to feel, and to connect from a place of authenticity and strength. And there's a kind of beauty that comes from people who have been through pain and still choose to love. It's a beauty that can't be faked. It's earned. It's the beauty of resilience, of wisdom, of depth. When you've been broken and rebuilt, your love becomes more intentional, your empathy more profound, your presence more powerful. You stop loving from fear and start loving from truth. And that's when trust becomes not just something you have, but something you are. And there will come a point in every relationship where you're tested beyond what you thought you could handle. You'll reach a moment where your patience wears thin, where your heart feels tired, where your mind whispers, maybe it's not worth it. But that's the moment that defines the future of your connection. Because rebuilding trust isn't about the easy days, it's about how you show up on the hard ones. It's about how you handle the silence after an argument, how you respond when your triggers are pushed, how you choose to love even when it feels uncomfortable. The real power of a relationship lies in those moments when you decide to stay open instead of shutting down, to keep showing up instead of walking away. And the truth is, most people want love, but few are willing to do the work that love demands. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a set of decisions repeated over time. It's showing up when it's inconvenient. It's holding space for someone's pain even when you don't understand it. It's being willing to say, "I'm sorry," without waiting to hear the same words back. Rebuilding trust means doing the uncomfortable emotional work, because comfort never builds growth. It's in the discomfort that transformation happens. And when trust has been broken, one of the hardest things to face is uncertainty. You don't know if you'll ever feel safe again, if things will ever be the same, if the connection will ever reach the depth it once had. But maybe that's not the goal. Maybe the goal isn't to go back, but to go forward together with more awareness, more respect, and more truth. Because the past is not where love lives. Love exists only in the present moment. The question isn't, can we go back to how it used to be? The question is, are we willing to create something new, something better, something real? And rebuilding trust requires emotional transparency, and that means being willing to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. It means saying what you really feel, not what you think the other person wants to hear. It means allowing yourself to be seen, not just in your strength, but in your fear, your doubt, and your need. Because when both people show up fully without masks, without pretending, that's when true intimacy begins to grow again. Intimacy is not about physical closeness, it's about emotional nakedness. It's the courage to say, "Here I am, this is me," no filters, no walls. And to rebuild connection, you must also rebuild respect. Trust and respect go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Respect means valuing the other person's perspective even when it doesn't align with yours. It means recognizing their humanity, their flaws, their emotions, their process. You don't rebuild trust by demanding change. You rebuild it by inspiring it through your own actions. When you lead with respect, it becomes contagious. It invites the other person to meet you at that same level of integrity and awareness. And sometimes the reason trust breaks down isn't because of betrayal, it's because of disconnection. People stop communicating their needs, stop expressing appreciation, stop making each other a priority. The relationship becomes routine, mechanical, predictable. The spark fades and the emotional distance grows until trust begins to erode quietly in the background. To rebuild connection, you have to reignite that spark not with grand gestures, but with intention. Look your partner in the eyes when you speak. Touch them with presence. Speak words that affirm, not words that tear down. Express gratitude for the small things. Connection thrives where appreciation flows, and rebuilding trust also requires emotional accountability. You can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You can't grow if you're always blaming. Accountability is saying, "Yes, I played a part in this. Yes, I could have done better." It's the willingness to look at your patterns, the ways you've reacted, the fears you've projected, the walls you've built, and take ownership of them. Because accountability isn't about guilt, it's about empowerment. When you take ownership, you reclaim your power to create change. And that change starts with emotional honesty. The biggest reason trust is lost isn't always because of betrayal. It's often because of avoidance. People avoid hard conversations, they avoid discomfort, they avoid facing the truth because it's painful. But every time you avoid the truth, you weaken the foundation of your connection. Truth may hurt for a moment, but lies destroy slowly. If you want a relationship that lasts, you have to be willing to have the conversations that scare you, the ones that make you tremble, the ones that strip away pretense and reveal what's real, because what's real is the only thing that can truly heal. And forgiveness is also an essential part of rebuilding trust, but forgiveness is often misunderstood. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying, I choose to no longer let this event control my peace. It's not an instant moment. It's a process, a practice, a gradual release of the pain that keeps you anchored in the past. Forgiveness doesn't erase the memory, it transforms your relationship with it. It allows you to look back not with bitterness but with wisdom. To say, that moment hurt me, but it also woke me up. It showed me what I needed to heal, what I needed to learn, and who I needed to become. And sometimes, rebuilding trust means letting the old versions of yourselves die. Because maybe those old versions didn't know how to love consciously. Maybe they didn't know how to communicate without ego. Maybe they didn't understand that love is not about control, it's about freedom. Rebuilding trust means evolving together, growing into higher versions of yourselves who can meet each other with more compassion, more presence, and more truth. And if you want to rebuild connection, learn to communicate your emotions, not your accusations. Instead of saying, you never listen, say, I feel unseen when I speak. Instead of saying, you always hurt me, say, I feel hurt when this happens. When you speak from emotion instead of judgment, you invite understanding instead of defensiveness. You turn conflict into conversation. You turn reaction into reflection. That's how healing begins, through emotional intelligence, through compassion, through the courage to speak truth without attacking. And rebuilding trust takes time. It can't be rushed and it can't be forced, but it can be nurtured. Like planting a seed, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You water it, you care for it, and you trust the process. In time, the roots take hold again. The connection grows stronger, deeper, more resilient, because trust rebuilt through conscious effort is more powerful than trust that was never tested. When you've walked through the storm together and still choose to hold each other's hands, you've built something unbreakable. And you have to remember that love is not a noun. It's a verb, it's an action. It's something you do, not something you say. It's in the way you listen when they're quiet. It's in the way you reach for them after an argument. It's in the patience you give when they're still healing. Love is built in the small choices, the quiet gestures, the consistent actions that say, you're safe here, I'm not leaving. And as you rebuild trust, you'll begin to realize that connection doesn't just heal relationships, it heals people. When someone feels seen, heard, and understood, they begin to soften, their defenses melt, their hearts open. That's when love becomes transformative. That's when two people stop surviving together and start growing together. The bond that emerges from that level of awareness isn't fragile, it's sacred. And rebuilding trust and connection is not about erasing the pain of the past. It's about using it to build something wiser, stronger, and more beautiful than before. Pain is the teacher, but love is the lesson. Every moment of misunderstanding is an invitation to communicate deeper. Every moment of distance is a chance to reach closer. Every moment of brokenness is an opportunity to rebuild. Not the old, but the new, not from fear, but from love. And because love at its core is not about never breaking, it's about always choosing to rebuild. And the beauty of rebuilding trust and connection is that it forces you to redefine what love really means. You begin to understand that love isn't about constant harmony, it's about the ability to grow together through friction. It's about two people who have the courage to confront the uncomfortable truth that connection is a living thing. It breathes, it evolves, it requires care. You can't just assume it will stay alive on its own. It needs to be fed with intention, watered with patience, and protected from the storms of pride and indifference. Because without conscious effort, even the strongest relationships wither in silence. And what destroys trust faster than anything is emotional distance. The kind that creeps in quietly when people stop trying to understand each other. It's not the shouting that kills connection, it's the silence after the shouting. It's the moments where one person stops sharing, stops opening up, and the other becomes too afraid to reach in. The walls start to rise, and before you know it, you're living next to each other but miles apart inside. To rebuild trust, you have to break those walls brick by brick. You do that by choosing curiosity over assumption, by asking questions instead of making accusations, and by reminding each other that this relationship is a safe space, not a battlefield. And when people lose trust, what they really lose is certainty. They no longer feel secure in your presence. They start questioning whether your words match your actions. The antidote to that uncertainty is consistency. Not perfection consistency. When you show up consistently, when your actions align with your promises, when you follow through on what you say, the other person starts to breathe again. They begin to relax into your energy because consistency rebuilds emotional safety. It's not the big moments that restore trust. It's the steady rhythm of reliability that makes people feel safe again. Michael finally woke up. Because sometimes we stop seeing them for who they are, and we only see them through the lens of our pain. Every word, every gesture gets filtered through the memory of what hurt us. But when you decide to truly rebuild, you must look beyond that filter. You must remind yourself that the person in front of you is more than the moment that broke your heart. They're human, flawed, imperfect, but still capable of love, growth, and change. And when you allow yourself to see them through that lens, something softens. That's where empathy begins to rise again. And empathy is the bridge between disconnection and healing. Without it, you can't rebuild, because empathy says, I may not agree with what you did, but I'm willing to understand why. It takes humility to do that, to look beyond the behavior and into the pain that caused it. Often, broken trust comes from unhealed wounds. People act out of fear, out of insecurity, out of a desperate need to protect themselves. Empathy doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains it. And once you understand the pain underneath the pattern, you can begin to rebuild with compassion instead of resentment. And there's a powerful shift that happens when both people stop trying to be understood and start trying to understand. That's when the walls start to crumble. That's when communication stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a bridge. Because deep down, every human being wants the same thing: to be seen, to be heard, to feel safe. When you meet that need for each other, the relationship starts to heal from the inside out. But make no mistake, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering with peace instead of pain. It means looking back not to reopen the wound, but to honor how far you've come. Every scar tells a story, not of weakness, but of strength. The fact that you're still trying, still showing up, still choosing to love even after being hurt, that's courage in its purest form. And to rebuild trust, you also have to rebuild communication. Real communication isn't about talking more. It's about talking better. It's not about flooding the other person with words. It's about speaking with clarity, intention, and respect. It's learning to say, this is how I feel, instead of, you make me feel this way. It's learning to pause before reacting, to breathe before responding, to choose words that heal instead of words that wound. Because every conversation has the power to either build a bridge or burn one. And sometimes the most powerful communication happens in silence. When you sit together in understanding, when you listen without needing to fix, when you allow someone's pain to exist without judgment, that's connection. Because love isn't always about what you say. Sometimes it's about how deeply you're willing to listen. And rebuilding connection also means reigniting the sense of partnership. It's remembering that you're not on opposing sides, you're on the same team. Too often, people fight to win instead of fighting to heal. But in a real partnership, it's not you versus me, it's us versus the problem. When you adopt that mindset, everything changes. You start tackling challenges together instead of turning them into walls between you. You stop viewing each other as enemies and start seeing each other as allies in growth, and in growth. Real, uncomfortable, beautiful growth is the essence of every thriving relationship. Because the truth is, connection can't stay static, it has to evolve. The version of love that worked yesterday may not be enough for who you're becoming today. So, if you want to rebuild trust and connection, you must be willing to grow together, to keep learning each other, to keep discovering new ways to love, to keep adapting. Because love that refuses to grow eventually fades, but love that grows together becomes unstoppable. And there will be moments in the rebuilding process where you'll feel resistance, moments when your old wounds resurface, when fear whispers that it's safer to stay guarded. But connection doesn't grow in guarded hearts. You have to take the risk to open again. You have to choose vulnerability, knowing it's not guaranteed to be easy, but trusting it's the only path to depth. Vulnerability is where the healing happens. It's the birthplace of trust. Every time you share your truth, every time you allow yourself to be seen without the armor, you invite the other person to do the same. And sometimes rebuilding trust means redefining what it means to love yourself in the process. Because if you're constantly giving without boundaries, you'll lose yourself trying to fix what was broken. You can't rebuild connection by abandoning your own needs. True love requires balance. It's about giving and receiving, understanding and being understood, supporting and being supported. Self-respect is the foundation that allows you to love fully without losing yourself. When you trust yourself enough to speak your truth, to stand in your worth, you bring a version of yourself to the relationship that's strong, grounded, and authentic. That's the kind of energy that transforms everything. And if both people commit to rebuilding, the relationship that emerges isn't just repaired, it's reborn. Because now it's built on awareness, on effort, on gratitude. You no longer take each other for granted because you've seen what it's like to almost lose each other. You appreciate the laughter more, you value the small gestures, you listen deeper. You begin to cherish the connection not as something that's guaranteed, but as something sacred that must be nurtured every day. And you start realizing that love is not about avoiding pain, it's about choosing connection through it. It's about understanding that the cracks don't make your relationship weaker, they make it real, because perfection doesn't inspire trust, authenticity does. When you've been broken and rebuilt, you no longer chase the illusion of flawless love. You choose the kind of love that's honest, grounded, and alive. The kind that doesn't run when things get hard but leans in. The kind that doesn't just survive storms but grows stronger through them. And as you move forward in this process, something begins to shift not just in the relationship, but within yourself. You begin to see that every moment of rebuilding was never just about restoring trust with another person. It was also about rebuilding trust within your own heart. It was about proving to yourself that you can face pain and not be defined by it. That you can choose love again without fear. That you can open your heart after it's been shattered and find a deeper, truer connection on the other side. And because in the end, rebuilding trust and connection isn't just about saving a relationship, it's about reclaiming your power to love without fear, to forgive without forgetting, and to grow without giving up. It's about transforming the pain that once divided you into the strength that now binds you. It's about turning the breaking point into the breakthrough,